Earlier, I caught up with MP Andrew Gwynne, Labour's National Campaign Coordinator and one of the party's leading election strategists. Andrew, do you think that this process has been run fairly, and what does it mean for the Labour Party?
Well, of course, the boundary changes that were published at the start of this week are part of basically a hangover of the David Cameron coalition government. Of course, they were committed to cutting the cost of politics, and they said the way that they would do that would be to reduce the size of the House of Commons by 50 MPs. They changed the rules for periodic reviews of parliamentary constituencies so that rather than every 10 years or so on a rolling basis that constituencies would be redrawn to reflect the changes in population, they would be done every 5 years. Now, of course, the original plans put to the coalition government were voted down, but because the legislation wasn't changed, the boundary commissions for England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, 4 separate commissions, had to start the process again in 2016. And these are the proposals that we've got now. What I would argue is it's an unfair and flawed process for a number of reasons. Firstly, nobody's made the rationale for 600 MPs. I think that given we are already cutting the cost of politics, we are losing the United Kingdom's 73 members of the European Parliament. Added to that, all of their workloads going to land on MPs' desks. I think that we can make a cohesive argument that we shouldn't be cutting the size of the House of Commons anyway. And given that this same government has increased the size of the House of Lords, the unelected chamber, massively over this period of time, let's actually start by cutting the Lords rather than the elected Commons. But that aside, I think there is a democratic principle at stake here, because the government is not talking about cutting the size of the executive. And so what these proposals, if they go through, will do, irrespective of which party is in government, it will ensure that there is a power grab by the government of the day, because they're not cutting the number of cabinet ministers, they're not cutting the number of junior ministers, they're not cutting the number of the parliamentary private secretaries, so the payroll vote will be disproportionately larger, and all that does is it silences backbench MPs from all political parties.
For Labour specifically, what would it mean for them and also for your own constituency?
So in the analyses that have been done, the Labour Party is most affected, and it's affected in a number of ways. Firstly, there has been a massive increase in voter registration since 2016. Over 2 million extra voters have signed up to the electoral register, in part because of the European referendum and in part because of the 2017 general election. They are not counted in the new parliamentary boundaries, so already the boundaries are chronically out of date, even though they've not even been put into force yet, because 2 million missing voters are discounted from the calculations, and they tend to be in inner city urban areas and that tend to have Labour MPs, so it disproportionately impacts on Labour. And I think one analysis I saw suggested that if both the Conservatives and the Labour Party polled 40% in a general election on these new boundaries, the Tories would have an advantage of 30 seats. That can't be fair, and I think that really raises the argument to have a fresh parliamentary boundary review based on the most up-to-date electoral registers. In terms of my own seat, the current Denton and Reddish constituency in Greater Manchester, it's a cross-borough constituency between Tameside and Stockport. I've currently got 5 wards in Tameside and 2 in Stockport. It almost flips around. It's still a cross-borough constituency between Tameside and Stockport. I will have 5 wards in Stockport and 3 wards in Tameside. Most of the Denton and Reddish constituency goes into the new seat. It's renamed Stockport East and Denton. If these boundaries go ahead, and we will be fighting to make sure they don't, that we scupper these boundary changes because they are anti-democratic. They do give too much power to the executive. We'll be calling for a fresh review, but if the next general election is fought on the new boundaries, I've already made it clear to the local Labour Party that I'll be seeking the nomination of the new new Stockport East and Denton constituency.
So you'll still have constituency, hopefully, and it'll still be Labour, you hope.
Absolutely.
So but at the same time, there are several CLPs that are now starting deselection proceedings against sitting MPs. Is this healthy for the Labour Party?
Well, I think we need to clarify what's going on here. Firstly, none of the selections for Labour-held seats have started. That process has not begun, so there are no deselections taking place. What there have been are a number of motions of censure or of no confidence. Now, of course, I would urge constituency Labour parties to tread with caution here. The Labour Party is a broad church. We need to reflect a wide range of views across the centre and centre-left, and be respectful of differing views and opinions. Clearly, it is a matter of for Labour Party members to decide who they want to be their candidates at the next general election, and there are procedures in place for them to choose who they want to be their parliamentary candidates. But I want us to be united. I want us to face the real enemy. The real enemy is this Tory government. They are on the verge of collapse. They are risking our country's future, and they are decimating our public services. And if we want that radical, transformational Labour government, if we want to improve Britain for the many and not the few, if we want Jeremy Corbyn as our next Prime Minister, then we have to focus all of our energies on fighting the Conservatives and getting rid of this government. Anything else is a distraction, and anything that distracts us from that purpose actually runs the risks of the Tories being in power for another term, and I don't want to see that for my constituency. I don't want to see it for the country, and I don't want to see the Labour Party miss this opportunity of governing, and governing with a radical transformational agenda.
Labour's Andrew Gwynne there.